I'm sure you've heard the phrase, the character wrote themselves, but what does that really mean? How do you create a character who practically writes themselves? Well, this is something I did not quite understand until I experienced it firsthand. So today we're going to talk about how to create a character that practically writes themselves. So when we talk about a character writing themselves, what does this really mean? Because obviously you're the author, you're the one telling the story here. So how can a character end up telling that story themselves? Well, this is when you end up knowing your character so well that their reactions just seem obvious. As you write the scene, their actions and their dialogue might take an entirely different direction than what you'd initially planned. And that is when the character takes the reins of the story. It's when you understand what your character would do so well that the character seems to take charge of the story, taking a new direction than what you'd originally intended. So let's talk a bit about how you can actually create a character who writes themselves. My first tip is you need to learn the gritty parts of your character. We're not talking about the surface level details here, the surface parts that they show to their friends and to the other characters around them. We are talking about the deeper, really almost dark stuff about the character that they do not usually show on the surface. Getting to these little details in the depths of your character can make them a lot more believable on the page. So try to understand how your character would act when they are hurting, their emotional reactions, their backstory, and how that emotionally affected them. We want to understand the deep, heavy stuff about your character. Now, the important part to understand about this is your readers may never see this side of your character. And by talking about this, I'm not suggesting that you should put this side of your character on the surface. And in fact, in most cases, it may actually be better if you keep this side of your character hidden. But these hidden things, the secret side of your character, is what you should know as the author. And if you know this, you can end up presenting your character much more naturally. So if you need help with this, it's a very helpful technique to start with a simple trait, and then we can sort of dig deeper into your character to understand the core of that trait. So for this example, let's choose something entirely random. For example, let's say that the character likes mint ice cream, for example. Okay, they like mint ice cream. Why do they like ice cream? Because it's sugary. Why do they like sugary things? Because it's a craving. Why do they crave sugary things? Because it takes their mind off other events. What events are they trying to distract themselves from? They are trying to distract themselves from blah, blah, blah. So, as you can see, you can start with a very simple, almost meaningless trait, but you can slowly dig deeper, asking yourself questions. Why do they like this? Why is this the way it is? And you can dig further into your character's personality, and eventually you will get to the core of your character's emotions. This can help you to understand the stuff that your character hides under the surface. Because when we want to present a character who feels realistic, we don't want to simply look at who they are on the surface. We want to understand why this character is the way they are, and what events in their backstory really shaped them to be that kind of character. In that as well, backstory is obviously important when it comes to developing a character, but understanding their experiences as a whole is most important. So, for example, to create a deep character, they do not necessarily need to have a dark backstory. They do not need to have experienced tragic events. However, characters always have underlying emotions. There will be a version that they show of themselves on the surface, but there'll also be a version of themselves that they do not show to the people around them. And as the author, you need to understand how their backstory led to them forming this underlying version of their character. So what events did your character experience throughout their lives and through their past that shaped this under the surface version of them? To understand that, we can look at the second tip, which is focus on their flaws. People can see if a character is heroic on the surface. That is surface level stuff. If you want a character who tells their own story, you need to figure out their flaws. In a tough situation, when your character is pushed to the limit and they need to make a really difficult decision, when there's no other choice that they can make, under stress, this is when you can see the raw and honest side of your character. So, as you are developing your character, try and put them into a situation where they have to make a choice between two or more difficult choices. There is no good choice in the situation. They need to make a difficult decision. In those moments where they need to make a tough decision, this will bring out the honest side of your character. This will show how they respond when things get difficult. So, in order to understand your character's flaws, once again, you need to sort of go back to their backstory and understand the events that shaped them. For example, if they were someone who everyone looked up to often in their backstory, they may feel like they are unable to fail, that they must continuously be perfect. So when they are trying to make a difficult decision, they may have this sort of decision paralysis where they don't really know and they feel unable to move because they are the kind of character who feels like they always need to be perfect. As another example, if you have a heroic character who is always saving the day, who is extremely capable and good at saving other people, maybe in their backstory there was a moment when they failed, when they did not save someone. So they're trying to constantly over-prepare to make sure that they can always save the day because they don't want to fail like that again. Maybe in a moment of stress, those memories that they faced, that event they experienced in their backstory comes back to haunt them in a similar moment. And maybe this makes them want to protect that person they care about even more because it reminds them of what they experienced in the past. Now, number 3 is give them a unique voice. So imagine if you were listening to this character in an anime. So how would this character talk? Give them a distinct manner and a pattern of speaking. And try and choose one adjective to describe it. So they could be gruff, stoic, calm, polite, friendly, optimistic, for example. So once you have your main adjective that can be used to describe how this character speaks, find another that seems to conflict with it. This is a good way to create a character with naturally contrasting qualities. So they might be friendly and calculating. They might be gruff and sweet. They might be stoic and bashful. They might be polite and clumsy. This reveals a great deal of information because a character who seems friendly might be calculating under the surface. Someone who appears stoic might actually be using it to cover up shyness. So by creating these two adjectives, these two seemingly contrasting traits, you can create a character who feels way more unique because you're not only looking at a character who's simply stoic then, you're looking at a character who has an underlying personality, a different side to themselves beneath the surface that maybe they don't always show to the other people around them, but it makes it way more interesting to write them. And it will mean that as you write them, you can sort of bring those unique hidden qualities to the surface. Number 4 is find their motivation. Goals are not the only important part, and usually when I talk about characters, I talk about how important it is to give them a goal. However, what is even more important than goals is the reason why that goal is important. Their motivation needs to drive them in the story, especially when things feel difficult. When they need to do something, especially when everything seems against them, this will make the journey feel more rewarding. This motivation is their drive in the story, which will make all of their actions seem more significant. So when your audience is looking at this character, they need to understand why the goal is so important, why this character cannot fail. If you simply give your character a goal without adding any motivation or reasoning behind the action, it's going to make the goal feel less important. For example, if you were creating a hero character who needed to protect the city from a villain, this on its own does not have a very important weight. You know that the hero does want to protect the city from a villain, and maybe this villain is really dangerous, but we don't really have a personal reason as to why this goal feels important. But let's say that we give this hero a motivation. Let's say that maybe the villain took something important to the hero. Maybe the hero is running out of time in some way. Maybe the hero needs a special item that the villain has taken in order to save the life of someone they care about. So that is more of a personal motivation that the hero could have. It is no longer simply about saving the rest of the city. The hero needs to save a person that is really important to them. And so the hero needs to feel like this goal is so important that they would do whatever it takes to be able to achieve this goal. When you present this goal with more personal meaning to your audience, it's going to feel a lot more relatable to that audience. The audience will be able to understand more why the hero is taking these actions. It is not simply for the sake of the entire city, even though they do want to protect the city, but it's also to protect the person who they care about the most. So when you are presenting your character, these are the 4 main qualities that will make building that character more important. And if you develop your character in this way, you'll eventually be able to create a character who practically writes themselves on the page. Really get to know your character, not only the side of themselves they show on the surface, but the side of themselves that no one ever sees, not even the readers. You as the author are the only one who will understand and see this side of your character. But once you understand them, your character will be able to take the reins of your story and be able to present that story in a unique way on the page. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know more about the characters you're creating. I'd love to hear about them, and I'm sure others would love to hear about them too. Visit my website, mirascross.com, for resources, templates, and workbooks that can help you to level up your story. Again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!